So, gotten a little weird lately, but playing with some things. By the way, happy birthday to me. So I started the stupid project that I may have mentioned before. I am day 2 into eating mini donuts as my only food. So, yep, it's gotten a little weird. I am at least intelligent enough to know that that would get old fast. So I got, I think, 8 different flavors of mini donut. And I eat one each hour, each day that I'm awake. So that's been one of the projects that I'm goofing around with. I'm also doing a little bit of research for my setting, my world building project. And I haven't forgot about doing the rewrites of the existing fiction, so we should probably get back to that at some point. But in the process of working out some ideas for playing with, for making additional worlds for my setting that I talked about last night, I built a new list of settings and stories that I enjoy. And of the settings and stories that I enjoy, I've apparently grabbed a whole heck of a lot more settings. So I'm exploring some of that, but it's on top of what we already did before. So I'm not sure I'm going to get to that right away. So I've got this huge document right now that is a list of some of my favorite settings. So Dune, Stargate, Star Wars, Enemy Mine, Aliens, Babylon 5, Matrix, Firefly, Cowboy Bebop, Terminator, Jurassic Park, Mad Max, Predator, Battlestar Galactica, Planet of the Apes, Akira, Alien Nation, and it just goes on, and it's science fiction. There's some fantasy in here, I think, too. I have 12 Monkeys is in there, RoboCop, Body Snatchers, Children of Men, Blade Runner, Ex Machina, Live, Die, Repeat, I haven't seen, but I've heard about. The webcomic Girl Genius, the movie WALL-E, Arrival, Logan's Run. That's one that would be fun to explore again. Try to reimagine that. Fifth Element, Interstellar, Battle Angel Alita, Logan, the Wolverine movie, and then Harry Potter, Doctor Strange, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dark Crystal, The Golden Compass, The Mummy, Hellboy, Lost in Space. There's one called Charlie Jade, which I'm a big fan of. Warehouse 13. There's Tron, Dark City, Existence, which is a movie I want to rewatch and review at some point because that was a trippy movie. But so there's a lot of stuff to play with. Total Recall, Metropolis, The Thing, Gattaca, Judge Dredd. Red Dwarf would be fun to play with too. Time Cop, V for Vendetta, Dragon Riders of Pern, Transformers. All of that is just playgrounds, but it's stuff that we could use in addition to the video I made a while back where I list off the ones that we could explore further past the first batch that we did. So there's all that, and that's a pretty big chunk of titles to play around with. But I also have beneath that the titles of stories and novels written by Jack Vance. So The Dying Earth. So The Dying Earth, The Eyes of the Overworld, also potentially titled Cudgel Kugel, the Kugel? I don't know. Kugel the Clever. And then Kugel Saga, Kugel the Skybreak Splatterlight. Boy, he apparently didn't like to use standard grammatical structure. The Laughing Magician, and Rialto the Marvelous are some of the novel titles. And then there's a series, that's all in the Dying Earth series. Then there's Lioness, which is Lyonesse. But there's a trilogy for that one, and each one has its subtitle, which is Soldrun's Garden, also titled Lioness in Soldrun's Garden, The Green Pearl, and Madouc, Madouc. I don't know how else to say that. Then a science fiction series called the Demon Prince series, which includes the Star King, the Killing Machine, the Palace of Love, the Face, the Book of Dreams. All of those are really cool titles to just take them and go like, the Book of Dreams, what's the story? And then come up with something with it. We have Cadwell's Chronicles, Alistair Cluster, which is mostly written as names with dates after them. So then Durdain, the Brave Free Men, Asutra is what it is. Not Kama Sutra, just a sutra. The planet TSCHAI, Planet of Adventure, City of Chash, Servants of Wank, the Dirter, and the Noom, I guess, with a P as the start of the, anyway, non-series science fiction novels. The Five Gold Bands, alternate title, The Space Pirate, author's preferred title, Repere. And so we have 3 potential titles just from that one book to play with. Vandals of the Void, To Live Forever, The Big Planet, The Language of Pow, Slaves of Clow, also known as The Planet of the Damned, alternate titles preferred by Vance, Golden Iron. Again, we get preferred titles, and different titles are all options of different titles that we can play with. He's got a pretty substantial list of these stories. The Blue World, Space Opera, Infurio, The Gray Prince, Showboat World. And some of these, where it's like a decidedly specific name that's being given to some of the places or the characters, we could just rename them and just use the rest of the title. The Night Lamp, Port of Call, Selected Novellas, Overlord of Maxus, Son of the Tree, Abercrombie Station, and its sequel, Cholwell's Chickens. Wow. 2 novellas later issued as Monsters in Orbit. Okay, so we get some titles to play with. The Moon Moth, Gateway to the Strangeness, The Dragon Masters, The Brains of Earth, The Last Castle, Three-Legged Joe. That sounds like a dirty story to me. Dobkin's Job. He did some mystery stories. Take My Face, Isle of Peril, Strange People, Queer Notions, Man in the Cage. Okay, and then we have collections. When the Five Moons Rise, The Narrow Land, Dowling, Terry, and Jonathan Strahan. Hard Luck Diggins. Dream Castle. Okay, so there's some subtitles there that we can work with. Now, Fritz Lieber is the next author that we have a list of stuff from, and he's best known for Fafid and the Grey Mouser. And so we've got the titles of some of those works, but he also has other stories. So Gather Darkness, Silver Eggheads, Tarzan and the Valley of Gold, Bazaar of the Bazaar. Oh, my mouse just stopped working. He's got a huge list. The Ghost Light, Gummidge and Friends, 1939 works. So it's actually, we have a timeline of his works here too to follow if we wanted to. It's pretty substantial. Dr. Adam, Garden of Evil. Good Lord, he's got a huge list here. And then the third author that I had forgotten last time was Poul Anderson. Earthman's Burden, Star Prince Charlie, Hoka Pokas. Like, he literally named Hoka, and he has a couple of them that are in that sequence that use that in the title. Starways, also known as the Peregrine, The Snows of Ganymede. See, that just seems like a great title right there. Early period, The Saturn Game. Pulsotechnic League, War of the Wingmen. But so we have, again, a huge list of potential stories to grab the titles from and imagine what the story would be. The Golden Horn, The Road of the Seahorse, The Sign of the Raven, Perish by the Sword, Murder in the Black Letter, Murder Bound, Conan the Rebel, The Devil's Game, War of the Gods, Mother of Kings, Midsummer Tempest, Operation Otherworld. I mean, King of Wise, the letter YS, Roma Mater, Genesis. That sounds like a title that's been used before. The Winter of the World. So, I mean, I have this massive list of titles that I could just sit down and go like, okay, so what are the stories that these are based off of? And not research them, just come up with stories that fit the titles. That could be half the fun of what I do. But on top of that, we've got to rehash the ones that we worked on before. I think the last one we were working on was what was it? It was League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I had started to take a look at it and see what opportunities were available in that story. And I think I had lost my way on that one, and that was right before I had that week of just exhausting work where I'd come back and I'd try to get ready for an episode and I'd fall asleep over there. But we should get back to that, and we might do a little bit of that. Well, we're 15 minutes into the night. I don't know if we're going to get back to that tonight. Maybe tomorrow night. But trying to remember what are the other ones that we had to do. We hadn't done Terminator. We hadn't done Blade Runner. And I don't think we had done Buffy yet. I think there's probably one or two others that we haven't explored yet. So we have the chance to revisit those again. And then once we get through that, I think what I want to try to do is then go back and see those videos and see what other ones we brought up as possibilities that we hadn't gotten to yet. But in the meantime, I will probably still stop in the middle of that every now and then to review, excuse me, it's those donuts, man. They've got those holes in the middle. They give me gas. I'm kidding. I'm joking about that. But so the main setting that I've been working on, I'm sort of bouncing my head off of right now and trying to figure out what direction I want to go with that. Because after last night where I rebuilt some of the ideas that I was using so that now it's 6 sets of 3 and I do have my document in front of me now so that I can more knowledgeably refer to what I'm talking about. So we have the 6 elements, the earth, air, fire, water, metal, wood. It's sort of the 5 Chinese elements, which are the earth, water, fire, metal, and wood. They don't include air, but I'm chucking air in there and get us a nice 6. And that breaks down really nicely when we do... I was playing around with the character classes that are usually used in role-playing games. And so we have like Sorcerer Wizard, Warlock Cleric, Monk Druid, Ranger Barbarian, Paladin Fighter, Rogue Bard. And so we have 6 sets of 2 that we can use. But I need to add some things because the pattern I'm working with most of the time is 6 sets of 3. So I need to add, and so Sorcerer Wizard probably could take on an Artificer. And I'm not sure what I'm doing for a Warlock Cleric yet. Monk Druid, not sure. Ranger Barbarian, not entirely sure yet. Paladin Fighter, not there yet. I'm debating whether or not some of the classes from some of these other structured games, like the Dark Eye from Germany, or the Drakar and Daemanar from Sweden, they have some different modes. There's also a class for certain games that I've looked at where they have like a merchant class or a trader or something like that. And I think that would be a good pairing for rounding out Rogue, Bard, and Merchant. The Paladin Fighter set is meant to be champions, so knights and mercenaries, essentially. Ranger Barbarian works roughly because Ranger is a wilderness survivalist and outdoorsman, and the Barbarian is usually considered to be a primitive person from a tribal community that lives in the wilds. Monk and Druid are both sort of spiritualists without necessarily being religious figures, whereas the cleric is usually somebody who's a devotee of a god, and the warlock is somebody who's a somebody who's kind of bound themselves to a supernatural entity of some kind, in the same way that the cleric binds themselves to a god. And the sorcerer, wizard, and probably the artificer, which is the other class that I may pair them with, they are just pretty much those who study the arcane mystic arts. And so having 3 for each set is sort of the goal I want to go forward with. I have to kind of do a little looking around to see what kind of options might be available for that. And I could then sort of equate each of the classes with one of the first mother, or each of the sets, the triptychs, with each of the first mothers. But I also have the races that I put into triptychs. We have the dwarf, kobold, dragon, the fae, the hags, and the dryads, ents, and other nymphs. We have the gnomes, imps was the one that I was doing for that, and then the pixies. And then humans, trolls, giants, animals, beasts, and mythical monsters. And then plants. I don't know what the next step up for that is. It might be grove or forest. And then past that would be mythical world tree kind of concepts. And you have in those 6 sets of 3. Now, I debate whether or not I'm going to include a secret 7th set of 3, because there's that other secret first mother. But if we do that, do we also include a secret set of 3 classes? I might have to go back over and brainstorm some of that too. So a lot of that's going to be going forward with that. And one of the things I ended up doing last night was building out a chart and just suddenly realizing how much work there is to chart out all the potential crossbreeds. So like taking a dwarf and a dwarf, you get a dwarf. So I built a chart, bar across the top, bar across the side, and just each of the names of the different races, and then each of the names of the different races, so that when you go down like a multiplication chart, you'll see where they all fit. So it's like dwarf and dwarf is dwarf, dwarf and fey is alfar, dwarf and gnome is ludek, dwarf and human is a half dwarf. I forget I had a name for that. I haven't decided what happens with dwarf mixed with animals. The dwarf mixed with plants has a possibility. Dwarves mixed with kobolds may be, or the half dragons, or the dragonoid people, may be gremlins. I haven't figured out with hags, imps, trolls, beasts, the secondary plants. Dragons I haven't figured out. Dwarves mixed with dryads may be green men or bush pygmies. I haven't figured that one out yet. Picts, I haven't figured out. Giant, like, what is a giant dwarf? If you crossbreed a giant and a dwarf, what do you get? Do you get a normal human? I have no idea. I have no idea what that's going to look like. I do think that one or two of the other role-playing settings that I have some copies of may have some variants on some of that. I think there's a Trudvang or something like that from Sweden that was translated into English. I do believe they have some half trolls. They're like half trolls humans, maybe, and half troll dwarves. And I'll have to take a look at some of that to get a reference. But once you've got that, that's just all the dwarves. And then you go through the categories for the fae and all the other races that they can be paired with. And you just build out this massive chart, and it's a huge chart. And right now there are a lot of empty spaces on it. I mean, what do you get when you cross a dragon with a troll? What do you get when you cross a regular wolf or a giraffe with a pixie? I mean, what what is that gonna be? And to a certain degree, I don't need to necessarily go to that level because if it's needed for a story, I'll generate it at the time I'm needing it for a story. But to know that that's a possibility. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is I've sort of built the setting thus far as I've played with it, with the idea that the gnome race is one which has taken animals and done the Island of Dr. Moreau gig where they convert them into humanoids. It's not binding to a human with an animal. It's literally just taking an animal and twisting it until it becomes human looking. And that's how I sort of envision the gnomes making satyrs and centaurs and minotaurs and things like that. And they may do that with a few other animal types and maybe plants. But I don't imagine they would do it aggressively with any of the other subsets. They may crossbreed different animals too, but that's not really their thing. Their thing is humanizing animals and creatures and to a certain degree adapting some animalistic traits into their own appearances if they desire to do so. The thing I sort of went with for that, though, was that if we take the gnomes and we crossbreed them with an animal, you get the puka, which is the more animal-featured gnomes, whereas the regular gnome is literally just a gnome to a degree. It's a gnome that's altered itself. It's not a crossbreed. And so the gnomes do that. The fae are ones that are stitching together flesh golems. They're taking the bodies of dead creatures and stitching them together like a Frankenstein creature and enslaving them as mindless automaton. And they can harvest pieces from other beings, political prisoners or stuff like that, and use those to replace their own parts as they age, or use them as scraps to build some of these flesh golems. And then humans have a tendency to summon spirits that they can turn into sort of companions, but they're like angels or demonic beings that they bind into a form to serve them. But the dwarves are the ones that are doing the crossbreeding, not the changing a thing into something else, not stitching together made from scratch creatures from parts from other beings. Legitimately taking two beings and breeding a new being from them. And you still have the parents as breeding stock, but they breed other beings from that. And so they have a reputation for making slave crossbreeds. And so what they make is more likely where the crossbreeds are going to come into play. The world isn't going to be necessarily littered with half troll, half imps. It's not something you're going to encounter very often, unless a dwarf did it on purpose or an escaped slave crossbreed bred with another crossbreed. And so you're not going to get a pure troll imp. You're likely to get a human troll crossbreed mixed with a gnomish imp crossbreed or something to that effect. So that they're going to be rare. They're going to be unusual. They're going to populate the world with monsters of a certain type. But they're not monsters in the sense that they are living communities of people with strange backgrounds to their heritage, living in the wilds. So I kind of feel like I don't need to fill this whole chart out, but there may come a time where in the purpose of the story that I'm building, I may need to do a question of design a character who's going to be half hag and half dragon. You know, I don't know what that's going to be like, but to know that that's a possibility that I can drop in on a specific character, a villain, a random roving bandit, or some such thing, a patron who hires them for a job. So I can build those out. And so I have this chart that I've been working on. It's just kind of playing out to figure out what the most important needed ones are going to be. So off the bat, the things that I'm going to have to pay attention to are the ones that they usually refer to as the gnomoid races. So that's going to be dwarf, fae, gnome, and human. And then we can include potential crossbreeds with a few others, especially ones that may seem particularly desirable to have a half-breed made for the uses of the dwarves. And then at some point, there may even come a point where you're going to have a possibility of a quarter breed, somebody who's just such a jumble, where you have, say, the idea of a kobold fae crossbreed with a wolf troll. And that crossbreed could very possibly be like a werewolf or something like that. You just have to figure out where it all fits in. And that possibility of mixing things in whole different ways, I think I'm going to have to build a little rule set that makes that workable. But I mean, that's half the fun of doing some of this sometimes. I'm yawning a lot right now. I think I'm sort of hitting the edge of my night here. But I do want to sort of get a little bit further in some of this, where I know I need to brainstorm up a few extra classes. And after we do that, I have to pay attention to the fact that I only really have 3 worlds other than the base world built so far. And I'm trying to brainstorm up options of what I can do for the other 3 to make the set of 6. I'm finding some of the flavor that I started with as the premise to be changing a little bit. When I originally started this story out, I was going for the John Carter of Mars, Dark Sun, kind of burnt, wrecked wasteland of a setting. It's morphing a little bit from that into sort of like a wild, twisted environment with some barren desert, yes, but also some maddeningly chaotic jungles, sort of like the options would be like the post-apocalyptic type settings that you can imagine. So like the desert land would be something a little bit more like a Mad Max. Whereas if you look at the idea of Chernobyl after the catastrophe happened there and how the wilderness reclaimed that, there's a part of that I want to be in there. And then I sort of want there to also be like fjords and mountain regions that are similar to the Viking era Norse countries. And with their savage fey monsters living in the wilds, the trolls and the giants and the mysterious Holder folk and those types of things that hang in the wilderness and make them dangerous. I want to sort of play a little bit with some of that, and I want to throw in a little bit of the Cthulhu style mythos, where that's more what I imagine the chaos entities being. So the fact that the world is built around the idea that in the very beginning there was nothing, and it was a peaceful, contented nothing that got ripped in half by an intrusion from the future of chaos. And when chaos tore its way into the world or the universe, that moment spawned the formation of the universe as a natural reaction to those chaos entities emerging into the world. And so part of what I need to build in this concept is a world that came into being in response to Cthulhu and that type of elder god, horror monster, powers from beyond the void kind of creature emerging into the world. So you have a world that has a response to that, but you also have that sort of filtering into the corners of that world. And so there's like a dark horror mystery aspect to it. And I want that chaos to have seeped into such a degree that the world feels like it's contaminated at all times, that some horror is always just around the corner or just under your feet. And tapping into the world's magic or eating too much from certain environments can potentially contaminate you with its chaos, its danger and risk. And I kind of want to see, I've been playing over the last few days with the idea of the 3 worlds I've built already, we have one that's fallen into chaos and apocalypse. We have one that was visited by fey creatures that interbred with the Medusa to get subbreeds of Medusa. And then we have the superhero setting in which some of the fey creatures may have left children as changelings. And so it sort of implies that somewhere in that mix, there was a world with mainly fey, like an Atlantean empire of fey. Before it collapsed and disappeared, they sent some of their children or a child to the land of Sentinels, the superheroes setting, that are the Supermen. They are elves or fey creatures that blend in with society and cover their own nature, except for when they're being heroic, where they reveal their true forms. That and the Medusa setting, where you have some foreign visitor to the world bringing in some of their own material when they interbreed with the Medusa and end up producing some of the different strains of Medusa. And that in itself also implies a world from which these Fae came. Now, do they come from the world where we have the parasites that attacked? I'm not sure I want that to be the way it goes, because I want that setting to be one in which the world collapsed, but the people are still struggling to survive in the destruction left behind by that collapse. Whereas I want the Fey world to feel like a glorious heights of empire, journeying to other worlds and influencing them, and sort of imperial expansion. And then a catastrophe that causes their fall. And part of me feels like that catastrophe could be some form of contamination of those chaos Cthulhu-like mythos beings. I'm bouncing a little off of that because I'm hitting the hurdle of the idea that we already have one world that ended in an apocalypse and you have struggling survivors. I'm not sure I want to do another world-ending apocalypse setting. And the other aspect I'm struggling with is, even if we did, like, every life form is completely wiped out and the world is just a dark, terrible, crushed, empty rock with the vestiges of empires that no longer exist anymore, haunted by spirits trapped within those places by the horror of their death. You could do a setting like that. The biggest problem I have with that is the way I've set up travel between worlds. We're mostly looking at the probability of characters shifting into a different body in a different world. There will be the option of traversing physically into a new world at some point, but I don't necessarily want that to be the first option. Like, I don't want you to say, like, for the world of the lost city of elvish glory, everything's dead. So the only way to travel to that world is to do it with the body of the world you're leaving. So you started in the Empyrean realm and you're a Andlong Fey, and you go down and you're in the Medusa world, and you're visiting the Medusa world. You solve a way to travel to this fallen elven Atlantis, but there's nothing living that you can shift from a Medusa body into a body in that world, so you have to travel it as a Medusa. That's a possibility, but I want it to be a possibility that you can also go from Medusa to whatever's living on that world, and then from that world shift over to being a human in the world where the parasites took over. So it's just sort of like, I haven't quite cracked what I need to do there. And I've not decided whether or not the tar parasites of Olean, of the Merc Rider setting, I haven't decided whether or not they are in fact chaos spawn. Those parasites could be chaos spawn that are introduced to the world. But they could just as easily be the children of the secret seventh first mother. That's a mouthful. That other first mother who lives outside the realms, they may have those liquid parasite creatures as some of their children. The question of, did one of them fall? One of them fell from grace and is the thing you oppose, or is the hive queen at the center of this parasite apocalypse? Is that the lost first mother gone mad, destroying an entire world? I mean, I haven't really decided which way I want to go with that yet. So I have to figure that one out. And then I got to figure out what more I'm adding to the other settings. So I got a plate load of whole new things to play with in the meantime. I think tomorrow I'm going to do a little bit more of the discussing of rewriting those stories again, because that's what we were doing before I got disrupted this week. But I've got a little time this coming week. I will play with some of those again, because that's just fun to do, and I enjoy doing it. N- Okay, so yeah, I do think sometimes the view counts take a while to update for videos, but I don't know. I I I'm I'm past trying to figure out what YouTube is telling me about things, and I'm just enjoying creating things to talk about. That's more what I'm focused on at this point, anyway. Um, I'm hopeful that this week I'll be able to do a little bit. I mean, I have tomorrow, Monday, and Tuesday that I can do a little playing around before I have to do a big shift at work again for Wednesday and Thursday. And then I think I have Friday, Saturday, Sunday again where I don't have to worry about a big shift at work. So I have a little more time to play around with. I may be building some of the stuff on some of my other channels. I'm not going to make any promises because I've tried that before and it always falls through. But I'd like to get a little work done on my other channels. I mentioned at the start of this video that I have started that stupid donut project that I talked about, where I wanted to see what the effects of having eating just donuts, mini donuts, the mini guys. Basically, every hour I'm eating one of 7 different flavors of mini donuts, and that's all I'm eating. It's a terrible idea, but I'll give it a couple days at least. I'm already 2 days. This is my second day into it. I'll give it like a week before I fully decide whether I'm going to commit much further. I'm thinking I'm probably going to get it out to at least 2 weeks. There's a part of me that says if you could do a whole month, it would be more appropriate. But we'll see where I am at the end of week 1 if I want to even bother doing this anymore. But I'm goofing around with that, having a little bit of fun. And that's probably something I'm going to drop over on my Opportunity Forge, which is the companion channel to this one. I'm hoping to get back into I should be able to pull up some of the files from some of my travels. It may take me a while to get used to pulling them back out and doing some editing on them, but I want to see if I can get some of that up and running again for the Roving Jack channel interviews at Makerspaces. I don't necessarily have to stick to the order that I did them in. That was one of the things that tripped me up before, was having to do them in the sequence that I did them meant that when it came to one that was particularly hard to do, I just couldn't move on to something easier first. And I've just decided at this point I'm not going to keep fighting that fight. I'm going to do some easy ones, get them out there. I'll go back to the harder ones when I have the chance to really put down a week or two to mow through them. And then from there, I'm contemplating like just seeing if I can get into a pattern of doing those things. Because I'd like to establish that this channel, Roving Jack, and Opportunity Forge is a playground for doing other things. So that's going to be like Opportunity Forge is going to be something where I might do art challenges. I might do some of my experiments in video making. This one's going to be more of story writing, maybe do some simple reviews of books, movies, games, and stuff like that. The other channel, I might do reviews of products and stuff like that. Products and maybe music, I don't know. I haven't decided where all of everything's going to work yet, but I don't have to decide. I can just play in those places and share what I'm doing while I'm playing. That's really what I should be focusing on doing. So that's what I'm trying to move forward into doing. I'm hoping to spend some of my time this week trying to get that to happen. I know I have to go down and get my car registered, and then I have to get it inspected, and then I have to get a few other things done because it is that month of the year for me where I have to get all of those things taken care of. and I only have like a week left to do most of it, and it's much harder to do a lot of that with all the closures of places and restrictions on public interaction. It makes it a lot harder to get some of that done. And then I have to keep reminding myself we have our taxes due on July 15th, I think. And I should probably do my taxes. So there's a lot to do over the next week and a half, and past that point, it's probably going to be busy and complicated the whole way, because I'm still trying to help my friend rent out the spare room here, and he's struggling with a lot of that. He just had a car accident, so he's down to one car, not two, and there's a lot of other maintenance going on around the house, screening and interviewing people for rental potentials, and we're trying to get some gardening done. I have to pot some of my wild onions that I got growing. There's just so much going on right now. I feel scattered, but I'm hopeful that I can get some very interesting things going forward. So looking forward to going into the rest of the week. I appreciate you joining me tonight. I have to go bang my head against some more of my projects. I'll come back tomorrow, and I think tomorrow we're going to try to get back into rewriting the rewrites of certain stories and settings, because I'm having fun doing that, and I kind of want to keep going with it. So thank you for joining me for tonight. I will catch you tomorrow night, and I mean it this time. Until then, take care. Have a good night. Oh, I'm going to type on the wrong keyboard, aren't I? Take care and good night. Stay safe. Stay cool. Catch you later.